Good morning, or good whatever time it is that you're watching this. If you look, you can see, look who you can see there. You can see a very handsome kitty who's been, by the way, very grouchy. I think it's the change of seasons, and he's like really grouchy about food. And it could, you know what it could be? Actually, it could be that we just opened and he's on his like metabolic diet food. And the bag is like pretty big. So I think when it's like brand new and it's fresh, it's like just beyond delicious for him. So I think it's like that's part of the response that I'm seeing. But anyway, so here we are today. So we're in the practical techniques and exercises of the seventh hub. And we'll be in, so these readings will, for the most part, be all practical from here on out because this is the techniques and exercises for the seventh hub. And then we're going to move into integrated practices for the entire, like all seven, how it all fits together. And then we're going to do in chapter 12, the descending. So, which is like about creating things. And this is a good intro. So what we're talking about today, this reading, which is going to cover inquiry and belief system, limiting beliefs, this is the top of that creation funnel. And, for many folks, it's like, I think of things like, going for like tarot readings or to psychics or asking people for advice, feeling lost, feeling like kind of like what is this thing? Like what's holding me back? What's my block? What's my purpose? What's my contribution in life? How do I solve this issue at work? How do I solve this issue in a relationship? Kind of like what's missing in my life. And so the point here that we're getting into, which is like, and this is in the seventh hub, which is really about connection to kind of the vastness that is, just beyond our perception in terms of what is knowable and what's accessible, potentially, even like what is, like the accessing, like whatever divinity is accessing our, just all of these things that are just kind of beyond our comprehension in terms of like logical thinking, that are kind of this mix of being sort of like sensationally felt and experienced. So like, wonder and awe and like the connection with divinity and that feeling of understanding, like when you're exposed to something and it just all of a sudden everything sort of makes sense for a moment in this like particularly felt sense where there's this kind of like really like thing. But anyway, this is very practical. I'm going to start reading because I think I might have some spoiler alerts in here. So I'm going to read and I'm going to kind of fill in the blanks from there. So the first section is inquiry. So inquiry, our questions, and actually one thing I will say before getting into this is that if there's something right now in your life that you're like I don't, you feel kind of like it feels like sort of a block or a question, or just something that feels kind of like you just can't wrap your head around. This is a good this application of this is really good for that. So this is my offering for that. So, okay, so our questions inform the answers we receive. You may wonder about your purpose and perhaps even feel forsaken by not knowing. But have you asked, what's my life purpose in earnest and been receptive to incoming insights and inspirations? If you ask a question and pay attention, you eventually get an answer, which is a process that can be immediate, but more often takes a little while and requires patience. But be prepared. Before you can surf the big web, you must first ask the question, paddle around, and wait to catch it. I discuss stillness, silence, and and concentrated focus, aka meditation, below. But first, consider inquiry as if it were prayer. In the Christian traditions, this involves talking to God, but the practice is powerful even without religion. You may feel desperate and ask, "What should I do?" or fear for the well being of a loved one and find yourself on your knees. This type of inquiry is for desperate moments. There's no shame in asking for help when you need it and accessing profound truths in the darkest times. Again, a lot of pain functions as course correction, pointing us into our integrity. However, inquiry and prayer can be used for non-urgent, larger questions too. So here's a point on this. So one of the things about being driven to surrender, like what is surrender? Like where it's, this kind of like divine notion of like I surrender to this, um, is like the way I see it is surrender is when you've reached the absolute end of your sense of like having any control over a situation or any knowingness. And an important part of inquiry, and I've talked about this in previous readings, but there's like 300 of them. So the chance. So in previous readings, which is like the point of inquiry is it's really it's asking a question without this sense that I already know the answer. And it's even asking the question to begin with, because upon like reflection, we can see that we're really nervous about not having answers. I mean, we're raised in school systems and put on the spot and all this stuff, like not having the right answer, or being wrong or whatever. So there's this defensiveness about being just receptive and not knowing. Like that not knowing is like dumb. To not know something is dumb. And as like there have been, like Stephen Hawking, the quote earlier in the book, which is that it's like knowledge is blocked by what we think we know. And then I think it's like Klaus Betting or someone, the father, one of the fathers of the scientific method of blind testing, said the same thing, which is like it's our knowledge or our perception of knowledge that gets in the way. So part of what inquiry is, and to do it in earnest and to do it effectively, is to really approach something with a sense of like, I really don't know that what this is. And this is how earlier hub matters really are helpful, like which is like all these things about like shame and like embarrassment and guilt and like fear of looking dumb, all this stuff about that comes with trying to kind of like protect ourselves, defend ourselves against um embarrassment or even ridicule for being dumb. It's like you don't know the answer. Like think about that, like however you respond to that when you're like you don't know the answer to that, and like how that is like how like our nervous system is toned around that at like very early ages. So we're talking about like getting this notion of not knowing as being something to really gird our loins about, like to really be protected against. And what we're doing right now to really access this greater level of possibility and this greater level of creation is to actually confront that notion of like needing to know what the answer is, or be like, I kind of think I sort of know. And so what is surrender? Surrender is when you're like, look, I clearly, I give up. I don't know. Like surrender is like, I give up. I don't know. I give up. I give up. I'm going to stop fighting this notion that I know how to solve this. Like the fighting of like this, the will, of being like, I know how to, it's like, and even like one of the things that surrender grants is this notion that it would be like, oh, your will with a, honestly, which is an idea that's not like really well aligned, is like your will and an idea to make an idea that's not really well aligned work. and well aligned is like with your integrity, with the reality of the situation, whatever. But like surrender is this forcing function of grace that like drops us to our knees and makes us helpless in the face of doing this beautiful thing for us, which is making us open to something like, okay, show me what is the actually way. Like, what am I missing? So, inquiry, when we're talking about inquiry, we're talking about having questions. We're talking about, and even like about how, the tradition of like asking, for help, and, in prayer and in meditation, and in, this kind of notion of like kind of speaking to, you know, ask it. Yeah, it's just communing with this kind of like this notion of something, of this like sort of greater level of consciousness than you currently like embody. Is the bowl, is the receptacle already full of stuff? So it's like, hey, can you fill, it's like how do do it, like how, it's like, how do I, how do I fill this? And it's like already full of a bunch of crap, So it's like the emptiness of reception, and is really important here. It's really uncomfortable to get to the point of letting go of beliefs and notions that are just like not working in the situation. And that's a lot of, I mean, look, like Parinama wouldn't exist without this, which is that the things that hold us back are the things that we think are true about us that are not. It's like to have like limitations and, so-called flaws. If you're self-aware of them and you inhabit them, they're actually just kind of their own entity, and the relative like negativity of them is eliminated through like compassionate self-awareness, where it's just like, versus this kind of sense that it's like, oh yeah, well, there's kind of something wrong with me. It's like this exploration. But anyway, this is getting a little too esoteric even for me. So, okay, so next next up. So how you ask questions matters. A famous example was King Croesus asked the Delphic oracle if he should go to war against the Persians. The oracle confirmed that if Croesus went to war, he would destroy a great empire. Unfortunately for the king, the empire was his. We get better answers from better questions, and there can be a process of iterations as we work to figure out what the question is. A good place to start is to become aware of what you want to know. The next step is to get more specific. Below are 4 examples of how to fine-tune the nuance of your inquiry from self-help author Laura Day's Practical Intuition. And like one more thing I want to say just before getting into this is that this thing, like one of the things that you tend to find in like an underlying aspect of um like of inquiry, and sort of the vessel already being like sort of full of information or notions or beliefs that don't work, and are like pushing against the integrity and like and even clarity, is kind of an idea like where you're not on your own side about it, where you're not seeing yourself as, where it's kind of like, yeah, I'm a like I just know it and I just don't do it. Like the stuff where you're like you create this division where you're like this insubordinate child that just won't do what needs to be done, even though it's like absolutely crystal clear. And it's like one of the things about integrity and things aligning with your authenticity is that like they line up, and they line up, and it's like that energy is like whoosh. So if there's things that are blocking it, or it's like, yeah, I just kind of can't seem to get to do this, I don't want to do it. It's like, that's not because you're an asshole. It's because, and it might feel like it could possibly be a lot less work to just fight against this, like in this particular dynamic, than to actually evaluate why there's this misalignment, because it's a lot of work. Look at my cat. Look at him. Oh my gosh. He's really he's a very good boy. I love watching his little blinks. I just love watching him living his little cat life, just doing what he does. Yeah. Okay. So I'm back. Okay, so we're talking about, like, asking a question, and this really I mean, it's a little messy the way I'm talking about this today, it just is what it is. I do these every day, so it's like, some days it's pretty, it's sharper than others. But, so one of the things so I would start with saying, like, this kind of earnestness and receptivity that's, like, similar to a level of surrender, and then it's asking your question as a question and not even like this, like and really being aware of, like, how much of, like, the girding the loins for, like, not knowing, trying to protect against not knowing. It's like being like, "Well, I already know this part, I'm just wondering about this." It's just like, how receptive can you be is gonna really impact how vulnerable it's a vulnerability, actually. There it is. That's the word. So, here's some of the tips on how to fine-tune inquiry. So, number 1 is sample question is, "Will I have enough money?" So, enough is a slippery word. A good first question would be, "How much money do I want?" Which can lead to other lines of inquiry. Once you've determined a specific number, pick a more specific time and ask, "Will I have X number of dollars by this date?" So, I don't know if I, like, love the example of money in this. I'm gonna be honest. It's just a way to I think that, like, I just like that this helps with reframing the notion of enough. Because some of this is even about getting clear about what you want. But, I mean, this is it's okay. I feel like this is okay. I feel like the stuff with money, and as a really decent money manifester myself, maker, creator, whatever, conscious creator, whatever. And we'll talk about how, a little bit about how money works as far as my experience with it and making it. Um, I would say, honestly, in reading this, like, will I have enough money? I just think the problem is, like, will I have enough is like, what the fuck is that question? I don't know. And the clarification is like, I actually like, how much money do I want? And like, and to what end? And and I do think that there's something interesting to kind of create that more the greater level of clarity. Will I have this money by this date? It's not the kind of question I ask, I'm gonna be honest, so I'm finding that to be sort of foreign. Yeah, I don't know. I think, like, the rabbit hole I go on this is, like, not in the service of doing this reading. So, the next question is, will I be happy? So, first ask yourself, what does it mean to be happy? And when you get clearer about specifics, ask about them. And this goes back to a question well asked is, is half answered or whatever. It comes up later. But, like, that kind of thing, it's like, "Will I ever be happy? Will I ever be happy?" Like, that's not really a question because it doesn't have inquiry in it. It's just kind of a flop. The inquiry is, like, actively trying to find, like, to discover. As like, good inquiry has a real, like, curiosity, like, a really heightened curiosity to it. So, yeah, what does it mean to be happy? And it's not like and this is the thing, so, okay, going back to this thing of, like, not having the answer being something that can make people feel defensive is to just realize, like, when you reach a question that's a really good earnest question that you don't have an answer for, is to allow that that's your question. That's your inquiry. It's like, well, your inquiry is what does it mean to be happy? What does it mean for me to be happy? What does it mean for me to be happy? What does it mean for me to be happy? What does it mean to be happy? What does it mean for me to be happy? And that's your inquiry. It's like almost becomes like a mantra where it's like you're asking with this like yeah. So next is should I take the new job? So the word should introduces biases that are beyond conscious comprehension. So as Laura Day writes, add the specificity of if security is my primary goal, or if experience rather than compensation is my primary criteria, or if I want to spend more time with my family to the question. So, if experience rather than compensation is my primary criteria, should I take the new job? And that's this is a good example of like when the question gets more crystallized that it begins to answer itself. If I want to spend more time with my family. And this goes back to it's like, will I be happy? And then it's like, okay, what's going to make like what are the things that in earnest, not just the quick like I'm happy if because love it's like allow the arising of just yeah, if you can. Allow yourself to really see what does it mean to be happy and thinking about what it feels like to be happy and what the qualities of that are. Where are you? What are the feelings? What are you doing? Who are you with? Then, should I end this relationship and move to a new city? So, compound questions have compound answers. Separate the one question into two and explore each of them. Okay. So, if this feels onerous, keep in mind the implication of cutting corners with the inquiries that shape our lives. If you feel pressure to provide answers before you're clear about the question, it can force your hand. If you feel pressure to provide answers before you're clear about the question, it can force your hand. An example, when we're young, adults may ask about our plans before we have them. The answers we provide can be like casting spells for future states we don't even want. If someone asks, what are your plans? The reflex can be to come up with something that sounds intelligent and responsible. But now an idea has been planted in your head that you must come to terms with not doing. I suggest that the answer to the question is a redirect, such as, when you were my age, how did you approach figuring this out? Yeah. Yeah. This is actually like, it's not, this is a really good example of how feeling like you need to have an answer winds up creating this like directionality that is antithetical to the receptivity. And it's inconvenient. I mean, I think one of the things is, like, I think I'm minimizing how inconvenient it can be because some of oftentimes what comes in is, like, if you're really listening to inquiry, it is, like, not what you wanna hear. Because the thing is, like, you're blocking it with what you do wanna hear, which isn't working. So, that kind of not working thing, there's a reason that we hold on to that stuff, is that it anchors us with a sense of safety that's not safe, but feels safe because it's familiar, and it connects to beliefs that have deep roots. And when we're talking about the Parinamba tangle, we're talking about how events and circumstances create reflexes, and that those reflexes have associated, we rationalize them with belief systems, and then those belief systems go into creating our reality. So And then that reality gets projected into the world responds accordingly, and then we just continue to tighten this tangle. And the thing is this untangling can be really disruptive to our sense of security and our sense of, like, foundation. It can be like, the disruption is it can be really major. So, I mean, the thing is like, there's always the option to stay and just, like, sort of fight and try to, like, continue to kind of contort oneself into making, um, a belief system. And this is actually, I mean, I think one of the things is this is a way that what is true reveals itself ultimately, because eventually integrity, authenticity, and the truth, like, when we're working under illusion, they just make life incredibly difficult. They make life incredibly difficult because we're so much conviction that this is the way it is, this is the way it should be, this is the way I know. And so, if I'm being, like, sort of cavalier about confronting these things, um, that's like that's a miss on my part, because this is major. When we're willing to see, it can show us that we've built entire aspects of our life that are completely out of integrity with who we are. And then there's this issue. It's like, wow, that's a lot of energy. It's a lot of risk. There's a lot that's at stake, um, in that mental framework. And the thing is, and this is in the beginning of the book, and this is once again this thing where this book sort of like recirculates into the beginning, um, which is that we only know what we're losing in these initial stages, and that's the disorienting thing. It's like what's possible when we're in integrity is kind of like the land of milk and honey, but it's like there's a period of yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. So, much appreciation. I mean, I certainly can speak to, an analogy that I had for ever since, for like 20 years, like that had related to my professional life, was just continuing to walk up to a cliff and knowing that if I jumped, I'd fly, but I'd walk up to the edge of the cliff and then I'd step back and go back into, doing work that was just really distressing for me in this kind of, like, atomic level. And I just kept doing it and kept doing it, and, in retrospect, I don't look back at that and be like, "Why didn't I jump?" It's like, well, I didn't jump because I didn't have what I have now with Parinama. I didn't have the I didn't have the framework to be able to navigate being financially unsafe. I didn't have the framework to navigate, like, my lack of, at the time, like, a very, very considerable lack of emotional literacy. So my feelings could just pop up, and it just they were and because they're unpredictable, and because they're like feelings and emotion are just naturally arising without an understanding of that, and without an actual like stronger sense of self, they just pick up the house, like, sort of into the tornado. And so that was, this risk of like, wow, any feeling can just take me away. So, and so that's one of the things about a second hub practice, is getting to be able to be, not overwhelmed by feelings, be able to have huge feelings and be able to stay with them and stay with yourself through them, and see them as not necessarily like sort of engulfing oneself, but to be able to experience them. And also my sense of self, that was something I just kept thinking, like, that I'd gotten so lucky And really, I guess at the core, it was like an interesting thing because I was confident, but my self-worth about my deservingness, you know, to like for whatever. Yeah, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. But even just feeling very like isolated in the world. So the thing is, so back to this, it's like the tangle. But again, where it's like another place for shame to pop up is to get into inquiry, ask the questions. It's like, what is my purpose? What should I be doing? Get an answer that actually arises out of grace and be like, yeah, I can't do that right now. And so to like watch where shame could go, oh, see, look, and instead say, I can't do that right now, but I'm really glad I got to see it. It gives me something. That gives me sort of a connection to something where I don't feel as untethered, and to say, "I can't do anything about it right now, but thank you for letting me know that. It's letting me see that as a possibility." Don't shame lack of courage. Shame in any sense. Like, shame is for harming others. I guess you could rationalize it's like, well, you're harming yourself. You're not. Like it's like to say like I'm not to say like you're not following a path that's harming me, so I'm shaming myself. It's like maybe, I mean, like maybe there's like a little bit in there, but certainly not to the point. Like if shame ever overrides the way, like the ability to connect with yourself and see yourself, like be on your side, to have your back, to be on your side, and to see that there's a reason. There's a really there's a reason, and it's not that you're not an asshole. Like, you were shaped by currents and forces larger than you. And this is, I think, one of the things where, like, this, like, really robust notion of individualism can be really damaging for people, is the idea it's like, "Well, I could fight it," and it's like, I could fight it. I mean, the tide, I've gotta say the rip current of, like, societal programming and even just, like, the economics and safety and needs being met and societal expectations for behavior in order to belong and to be loved and to connect with people, to be allowed to do things that you love to do, it's like all the concessions. It's not the shame to say like, "Oh my gosh, I should be more," whatever. It's like anything you can do at any level, like, if anything, it's just to simply be on your side. Just be on your side. Just be on your side. And like, "Oh, I'm such an asshole. I'm so stupid." All of that stuff. No, you're not. You're not, and you're not. You're not stupid. Are there people that are really smart? Yeah, I watched an Instagram reel this morning, and it just was like, "Oh, wait, there's just this, like, whole level of being articulate and the ability to, like, express and be well educated on a subject matter." I just thought, "God, that's so, like," it was, like, really aspirational, because most of what I've been filling my consciousness with is, like, are people that are just, like, it's, like, goofier and not in the vein of having, like, really strong, like, an empathetic, like, what I'd call, like, academic level, um, like, incisive intellect. So it was like, "Whoa, okay, yeah, that's like a whole thing." Yeah. Yeah. Look at how tired I look. I'm not really that tired, I don't think. But I don't know. Okay, so and here we go. By the way, the reel was sent to me by Mira, and it was Gabor Mate's son, Daniel. And it just was like, oh, okay, that's like the level. That's the level. It's really aspirational. Yeah, it was really aspirational. I know, it made me like all Twitter. I was like, wow, it's really smart. But yeah, so I'm not gonna eat on that. So, okay, so limiting beliefs. Let's do it. So our belief systems shape how we experience life. The lower hubs support the confidence and self-worth required to overcome early programming that taught us we are limited. In some ways we are limited. I mean, but it's like the relationship with it is really key. It's like, what is it true? Are you actually limited? And then it's like, okay, if there is a limitation, it's like, okay, to what extent can that be expanded? And if it is like a hard limit, it's like, okay, that's the shape of things. And if you really like yourself, it's like, yeah. If you really like yourself. So that's one of the things about limits. It's like one of the things about like personal limits in terms of like intellect or athleticism or whatever the thing is, like physical this or that. It's kind of like as soon as you're like, yeah, it's kind of like that's how it is. It just changes the entire shape of what a limitation is. Like a limit plus shame, like I'm supposed to be more than I am. I'm supposed to be something that I'm not it's like where a limit actually like gets a lot of heat, like it picks up a lot of like it becomes its own sort of like black hole of succubusness. Yeah. And actually I'll give a like one thing here, which is that, as an executive, one of the things that like I learned that notion from watching powerful people handle their limitations and realizing that handling and just being like, "Yeah, I'm not good at that." Instead of like being like, "Well, I'm kind of, I'd have time to do this, but I just don't." It's like that in that it's like normally, but if I had the time, I'd be doing it. But if like all like bullshitting, it's just like, yeah, no. It's like everyone knows. It's like what it's like there's just this whole thing. It's like just own it. It's like, yep, not a strength. This is it. But also it's not just to be like, that's not a strength. It's like, that's not a strength. This is what I bring to the table. It's like, this is my strength. That's not my strength kind of thing. Yeah. Like I hate like one of the things is like detailed work on spreadsheets doing in-depth analysis. I remember this like when I worked at this one company, I was trying to like build out an operations function. I was doing it myself, and I just get like filled with rage because my attention span just didn't support it for long periods of time. And it requires this very specific ability to just like kind of stay in like, I don't want to use the word minutia because that's minimizing, but it's like to stay in detail for long periods of time. And there are people that are just like great at it. I'm not one of them. What am I great at is like having the vision to figure out how to build out an entire, organization to understand what moves people as far as, as like selling things and, as a revenue professional, understanding how to navigate dynamics within a company, like all this kind of stuff. And it's not that it's like, yeah, but the point being that it's like that kind of like it is. So my first hire in I think the last two companies that I built stuff in was a operations director when I built an organization. So it's like the thing is like limits, being like there's no limits. Like, yeah, there isn't and there are. And it's like what they are as soon as it's like, okay, these are my these are my limits. These are the places where I'm going to really double down, where I'm strong. I call it the report card model, which is like, I remember, junior high school, I got a report card. It was like, I think it was all A's and one B minus. And the notion was like, well, you got to really work on that B minus. And I look at it and it's like, why? It's like, that's the thing I'm never going to be, like it's like I have there's A's and there's places where I could like be extraordinary, but I'm not going to focus on those. I'm just going to focus on the thing that I'm like sub-mediocre at. It's like it's really a recipe for mediocrity. And it's interesting. It's like another way that, and this is very Seventh Hub, that like schooling doesn't really teach executive functioning, which is like you triage the stuff that you're not good at. You attract great people that are good at it, and you build organizations that way. And you honor people for their strengths and their weaknesses, and you allow people to like not be good at stuff, and you allow yourself to not be good at stuff. So yeah, I think this is kind of one of those things like fear, where it's like, don't be afraid. It's like, the fear has a function, and limits have a function, because they're kind of like they help us focus, because it's like, don't keep banging one's head against this thing where it's like, I need to prove that I can do this, and it's like, it's just not one of the things. Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the things with like, because so I'd be like in this office, and there was this other like emerging executive who were working together. We'd be working until like the wee hours of the night. This was like before the internet was as like robust as it is. Um, so you're like in the office, and it just like, and I'd be like so angry, because I'd be like passing my capacity that what could ever exist, and I could just, the frustration, I'd be like, ooh. So it's like, yeah, don't do that. Find a way around it. Find the workaround. So I don't know. It seems kind of ivory towerish, I guess. So okay, so I discussed throughout this chapter how curiosity is an important indicator of intellectual capacity. Yeah, the ability to see patterns and to imagine a future, and the capacity to explore new avenues of interest determine intellectual capacity. Everyone has a unique parallax or perspective of perspective. Everyone has something important to contribute. Everyone has something important to contribute. That is a fact. That's even something where it's like you have to be good at everything is like part of this like bullshit that crowds that out. You know, it's like this kind of cool thing, like in a fantastic team, is that you have people that have these like different skills and strengths and perspectives, and you bring them together. And that's actually something that's a strength of mine, is bringing it together and creating the cohesiveness. So it's not necessarily being good at it, or even being like even close to better than other people are at things that I'm like leading people at doing. It's like the notion that leadership is about creating the cohesion in a group so that people can like really have the floor to do their best work. So reflect on your limiting beliefs about yourself by thinking about what you believe is holding you back. Trace this back to the source and ask yourself if this belief is based on your direct experience or on something someone told you. So often a projection of others' limitations. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So this is personal, but like when I grew up, my mom kind of had this whole thing about how I was like a simpleton, and she used to say, well, you could be a waitress or you could be a secretary because you're good with people. And she this like was really obsessed with this kind of thing that I wasn't that smart. I don't know where that comes from with her, but it really didn't have anything to do with me. It had a huge impact on me because for a long time, even as a like young adult into like being a slightly older adult, I was really like confused about things that were actually like part of my, it's like there was like this dissonance, because I was clearly highly intelligent, but I didn't own it. So it was confusing for other people. because it would be like, "Oh, I'm such a dummy." Like, and like that dissonance, when you find that dissonance where it's like that's, if you can detect that feeling, that's a good that, I mean, this is a very esoteric thing I'm about to say, but like when that kind of there's that quality with things, it speaks to it speaks to this notion of the fact that like when things aren't like working, that it means there's like something about the belief about how to solve something or exist or what you are or whatever. There's some belief that is not that is conflicting with like a larger reality. And a lot of times that if is going back to the thing about, being on your own side is like that dissonance can create distrust from other people because they can feel like, wow, there's something that just doesn't kind of line up. So if you're not on your own side, it can be like, oh, see, here's another thing to be ashamed about. Like, here's another thing to feel, bad about. But it's not, that's not it, That's not what it is. So there are many ways to be talented and intelligent. See chapter 3, and that's the Gardener's multiple intelligences. You and your emblem contain a unique seed of brilliance. Yeah, like you're brilliant at something. Everyone's creative. Everyone's capable of like I mean, because the thing is anything in you that is like there's something. Every single life has something important to express and to contribute. And I think that if there's anything that I've really come to feel like like certain about, not absolutely certain, but no, but just like the level of certainty I have on this is so strong. And I think one of the things that can, talk about a limiting belief, there can be a limiting belief that if it's not something where there's like a really clear way to make money doing it, that it's not valuable. So, I mean, that's one of the ways that like the economic model can interfere, can become like have this limit, like be a forcing function for limiting beliefs. It's like, well, if you can't make money off it, who gives a shit? I mean, it's just there's that. Yeah. Okay. So that's it for today. It was kind of kind of a long one, but so we're going to go next is going to be stillness and silence, take an awe walk, and then meditation, focus and concentration. And that one's kind of longish. As meditation is, I don't know, I'm always laughing about meditation, or, kind of like guffawing about this kind of like modern austere notion of like it being this sort of like this kind of like boot camp style thing that's like people love, where it's like it's in the seventh hub, and honestly, like of Paridama method, it's it's really a thing, but it's not that thing that like where people be like, I've meditated for 16 hours this quarter, like whatever, that's cute, but I don't know how that works to like gamification, that's fine. I mean, do what you want to do, but I think it's kind of funny. Okay. So, and then there's the creating charge and discharging. Yeah. So, okay, there we are. We have it. Okay. I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you. And yeah, if you have any comments or questions, just know that I do my best to answer them. Thanks. Bye now.